So, welcome to our Genesis series. Yeah, wait lang gumising. Okay, so welcome po. And today is the formal beginning of our Genesis series for the whole year. Nung isang linggo, we had an introduction on how are we going to look at the book of Genesis. And today is the first part of our Genesis series for the whole year. But before that, nung nagsimula ang taon, I told you, I had a promise sa inyo na every week we will recite yung vision natin, yung ating church vision, the church vision of IF Singapore, IF Manila, IF Vietnam, and until ito tumatak sa ating mga puso at sa ating mga kasukasuan. Kaya I left some blanks in there. Tingnan natin yung mga alala natin. Ano ba yung blank na? Sabay-sabay tayo. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. To be a community of Filipino disciples engaged in reaching the nations. So to be a what? To be a Calvary's. It could be a warm environment. So that's what we want to happen, or what we want to become as a church. As a church in Singapore, as a church in Vietnam, as a church in Manila, we want to become a warm environment community of Filipino disciples engaged in reaching the nations. So this is our church. And as we begin so if it's your first time today, welcome to Emmanuel Fellowship, and this is who we are. Okay. And as we begin our series for today, let me show you this picture. This one. Okay, so Genesis 1, this is among chapters in the Bible. This is one of the most disputed, highly debated. Ito yung one of the most controversial. Siguro, if not Noah's Ark, this is one of the most controversial parts of the Bible. And this is the evolution of man. Di ba? Nung una na kayo po, magapang. This is the theory of evolution as Charles Darwin put it. Kaya unang umangat na, may dala ng stick, medyo namayad na, hanggang sa tumaba na, ang dala na yung McDonald's ko. So, parang yun, sino ho ang nandito na sa banda dito? Ayan. Unless naman, well-evolved na si Adrian. Yung iba na isa pa siguro, mga naiiwan pa. But this is what science is saying on how everything else originated. So for today, we look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 up to chapter 2, verse 3, the creation story. And we look at that. I think this is very important because this is, people will ask you, what do you believe about this? And I believe now there's a lot of lessons we can get out of Genesis chapter 1. Aside from it is the story of how we were created, or this world is created, there's still rich story, rich lessons we can get out of this story. And before we continue, let me ask you this question. What kind of story Genesis 1 is? Ano ba ang Genesis 1? Ito ba ay history? Is this poetry? Or is this historical? Now, why do we need to ask this question? Because it's very crucial. This is where all the debates come from. Na, okay, kung historical yan, bakit ang bilis ng pagkakakit? Yung mga ganun mga bagay. Or mayroon bang pusod si Alan? Mayroon bang mga, kasi hindi mo sila pinanganak, may pusod pa sila. Ganun mga tanong. So, as we go through this story, it's very important for us to ask this first. Ano bang klaseng book ito? Is this historical? Is this poetry? Now, every time you read the book of the Bible, every time you read any book in the Bible, you ask yourself first, ito ba ay instructional book? Kasi, just like a manual, if you know if a book is instructional manual, then you know, if yung mga nakalagay doon, kailangan ng sundin. Pag sinabi, turn on the fan, press number 1, then it's instructional, you have to do it. If it's historical, you don't have to do everything that's in there. Ano ba, let's say, nagbabasa kayo ng history ng Celsa, then let's say, pinaglaban ng Pilipinas, tapos marami siyang asawa. So, it doesn't mean na kailangan marami niya kayong asawa. So, it's historical. It tells you what history is. It doesn't really give you an instruction. So, Genesis, what kind of book is this? Genesis chapter 1. Now, there are different opinions regarding this one. One of which that I want to show you, some people, their opinion about Genesis 1 is that yung pag sinabing day 1, let's say first day, light and darkness, for some people, they interpret that as a 24-hour day. So day 1, 24 hours, day 2, 24 hours, day 3, 24 hours. So in other words, every day is literally 24 hours. So 7-day creation, 24 hours each day. Some people, they hold that view. Some people, they hold the view na, like Augustine, si Saint Augustine, the early priest. For him, one day for the Lord is like a working day. It's God's working day. Indeed, it's not necessarily 24 hours. It can be 1,000 days, it can be 1,000 years. So for Augustine, according to him, one day to God doesn't necessarily mean 24 hours. So some people, they hold that view. Now some people, ang ginagawa nila, they try to count yung, nakapagbasa na ba kayo sa Bible ng mga genealogy, yung let's say Abraham, let's say Joseph, son of Jacob, son of Isaac, son of Abraham. So some people, they try to count yung kung ilang taon na yung earth from Jesus Christ to Adam, and then they, by looking at the genealogy, kasi some of the genealogies in the Bible, may nakagito kung anong age sila namatay, age sila. So they try to do that. So what they did, from Adam to Jesus Christ, 5,000 years daw yun. And then from Jesus Christ to us is 2,000. So what they're saying is, total natin lahat yun. Ang earth daw ngayon is 7,000 years old. Now there's a little bit problematic. Kasi let's say, when you see a genealogy in the Bible, when you say, let's say for example, Melchizedek, son of Mephibosheth, for example, it doesn't always mean na anak siya. When the word son, it can mean ancestor, or father, it can mean ancestor. In other words, yung, what, let's say for Mephibosheth and let's say Melchizedek, marami pa siyang anak-anak doon na hindi namin siya. So, the Bible only mentions the things that they think necessary, or they think is important. That's why if we count the age of the earth according to genealogy, medyo dangerous kasi hindi lahat siya ay complete. It's not really complete. But some people, they view the Bible or the Genesis 1 that way. Now, you might ask me, Pastor, what do you think? Ano ba sa tingin mo? What do you think is the right thing? Now, first thing, we have to understand that the Bible, it's not a science book. Okay, so that's where all the debates come. Just pardon me, we have to talk about this as a foundation for Genesis 1. So the Bible is not a science book. So it's very wrong to validate the Bible using science or validate science using Bible. Kasi magkaiba sila. Magkaiba sila ng genre. It's, we should not go that route. It's very, kasi ako po I'm sure, siguro nakapanood na kayo sa, let's say, National Geographic or sa Discovery Channel. They try to explain yung 10 plagues of Moses using science. Sabi nila na, ako, yan, totoo yan. Nangyari talaga sa Bible kasi according to science, these are all real. Nung napanood kayo, parang medyo natuwa ako na, okay, science na-prove na tama yung Bible. But as I study that one, I realized that that's actually very wrong. Because you don't compare science book and the Bible because they're not the same. Science books are written for a very specific purpose, and the Bible is written for a very specific purpose. Right? The Bible is written primarily because God wants to introduce Himself. Hindi sinulat ng Bible to tell us na ganito ginawa ang mundo, so ganito yung age ng mundo. That's not the purpose. The purpose of the Bible is to introduce God to His people. Now, if we do it that way, if we validate science using Bible or Bible using science, para tayo nag-compare ng adobo at saka ng cheesecake. Na pareho silang pagkain, no? But you cannot say na, nako, ayoko ng adobo kasi hindi siya kasi tamis ng cheesecake. How many of you know that's a crazy comparison? Or let's say, ayoko ng cheesecake kasi wala siyang karne. Of course, wala karne ang cheesecake. Kasi magkaiba sila. They're both food, but they're different kinds of food. You cannot compare them because one is dessert, side lang. You get the point? Bible and science, something like that. You don't marry them because they're very two different things. Kumbaga, para silang magkaibigan. Hindi sila pwedeng ipakasal. Mag-aaway sila. So, they're not good as couple, but they're good as friends. Okay, let's not make science as evil dahil it contradicts the Bible, or the Bible as wrong dahil it contradicts the science. They should not be compared. They're good friends, but they're not good couple. So, tayo silang pagsamahin. But for me, I showed you a picture of evolution. Personally, of course, I'm skeptic about the theory of evolution na tayo pinagaling sa isang small bacteria and then we think like this. For those of you who study biology, you know how complicated our body is. Di ba na as you inhale oxygen, and then it flows through your blood. Ang dami nangyayari na pagkasubo mo ng pagkain, nagdadadjust sa tiyan mo na hindi mo na alam, wala kang alam, ang dami nangyayari sa loob mo. And it's so hard to believe na from one single bacteria, we became as complicated as who we are right now. So I'm skeptic about that. But I'm also a bit concerned with the creation science na our Earth is 7,000 years. I'm a bit, because of the using genealogy as a computation factor, it's a little bit dangerous to do that. How can you explain yung mga fossils na billions of years na nakita? So it's a bit dangerous to go that road. So Genesis 1. Genesis 1 does not really tell you how the world was created specifically. That is not the purpose of Genesis. The Bible does not give you everything you need to know about science, to know about history, because that's not the purpose of the book. The Bible is written so that God will be introduced to all of us. Sino ba si God as a creator? Who is God as a father? Who is God as a friend? Who is Jesus Christ in this world? So that's the purpose of the Bible. The Bible does not give us everything you need, but the Bible tells you what you need to know about Him, about God, and about us. That's the purpose of Genesis. Now, there are 4 different possibilities on how you would look Genesis chapter 1. Una po, you can look Genesis chapter 1 as a literally narrative. You can interpret it as a literal history. Now, okay, day 1, 24 hours, day 2, 24 hours. Some people, they look at it, you can look at it that way if you think that's the proper way to do it. Another thing, you can look at it as a long period. Na yung day 1, okay, ano yan, thousands of years yan. Yung day 2, thousands of years yan. Yung day 3, thousands of years yan. So you can also look at it that way. Or, thirdly, you can look at Genesis chapter 1 as a history / poetry. And I think we could go this way. Na it tells about where we came from, but in a very poetic way. Di ba yung nakapagbasa, di ba? Hindi na mahilig magbasa ng mga tula kung kayo mga bata pa. Di ba? How do you know if one is a literary work? Kapag may mga rhyme, kapag may mga repetition, you know it's poetic. Now, Genesis 1 is something like that. It's historical, and yet it's written in a very poetic way. It's a very beautiful book actually. Yung picture ko sa Old Testament, sabi niya na, a lot of us Christians, we miss the beauty of Genesis chapter 1 because we look at it as pure literal history. But it's actually very beautiful poetry kasi ang ganda ng pagkakasulat niya. Let me show you this one. Sabi dito, yung day 1, day 2, and day 3. In flash, there. So, medyo poetic kind of. So, day 1, what is created? Created what? Light. Day 2, sky and waters. And day 3, God created the land. So, sabi doon sa day 1 to day 3, God created the realms of this world. Yung mga lugar. Now, day 4, day 5, and day 6, God created the rulers of the realms. So, day 1 to day 3, God created the realm. Day 4 to day 6, God created the rulers of the realm. Now, if you notice, meron silang parallelism. It's so parallel, it's so beautifully written na it has a certain message na we can actually miss. For example, itong day 1. Day 1 is like, day 4, God created sun, moon, and stars to rule the light. And then, day 5, God created birds and fish to rule the skies and waters. Now, day 6, God created animals and man to rule the land. So, parang it's very artistically written that we sometimes miss this one. And then day 7, God rested, or God rests. So in other words, you can see in here na yung order ng pagkakasulat ng day 1 to day 7, there's a specific purpose on how it is written. And you can see in here that one message we get from here is this, that the creation story tells us who's the ruler of things, who's the ruler of the world, and who rules man. Now, above all these things, God created sun, moon, and light to rule the light, birds and fish to rule sky and waters, animals to rule the land, man to rule everything, and God to rule man. It's like God is establishing above everything else, I'm the Lord of Lords, I'm the God of the gods, I'm the King of kings. So in other words, Genesis 1 is not really about science. So the question is, what is it about? O sige, Pastor, medyo okay, magandang ginawa mong yan, I appreciate that. Pero so what? I mean, what's the point of all these things? So number 1, Genesis is teaching us that it tells us about the hierarchy of things. Sino ba ang king? Sino bang dapat nag-rule sa inyo o sa ating lahat? Now, ito po, one thing that we have to understand as we read the Bible, as we read every book of the Bible, it's very helpful for us to know first, ano bang ibig sabihin niyan noon? Para malaman ko kung anong ibig sabihin niyan ngayon. What does it mean before? So that I will know what does it mean now. And part of knowing what does it mean before is to know sino ba nagsulat, who's the writer, and when was it written. Now, can anybody guess who wrote the book of Genesis? Wait, Moses. Moses wrote the book of Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. The first 5 books in the Bible is written by Moses. And so some of you would ask, okay, so paano nalaman ni Moses yan? God created light, and nasa pala si Moses doon. So how did he know that? Now, when was this book written? Now, if Moses wrote this book, more probably, this book was written during, or the revelation was given to Moses nung time na sila nasa wilderness. Diba? If you remember, ang mga Israelite galing sa Egypt, and then God gave Moses an instruction, Moses, free my people, bring them to the promised land. And then they were in the wilderness bago makakita sa promised land. And if you remember, if you're familiar with Exodus, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments nung sila inasa wilderness, Mount Sinai, ganyan. And most likely, God gave the revelation to Moses about this one while they were in the wilderness. And if you would come to think of it, at that time, nung mga time na yun, the neighboring countries of Israelites, even Egypt, they're worshiping a lot of things. They're worshiping the sun, they're worshiping the moon, they're worshiping the stars, they're worshiping the animals, they worship frogs, they worship fish, they worship horses, they even worship people. Now, when Moses told them the story, na this is how God created the world. God created the sun, God created the moon, God created the stars, God created the seas, the fish, the animals, and man. It's like God is saying, do not worship them. I created them. So nung sinasabi ni God ito kay Moses, God is attacking idolatry at that time na tell these people, do not worship sun, do not worship the moon, do not worship the star, because I created them. Do not worship any animal, fish or frog or whatever. Do not worship the Pharaoh, because I created them. So one of the purposes of God, why He created Genesis chapter 1, because it tells the people at that time that I am the God. I am the God of all the gods that you're worshiping. Do not worship them. I am the only one that we have to worship. Now, so anong meaning ngayon noon sa atin? What does it mean to us at our time right now? Now, if you do not let God rule over your life, something else will rule your life. Let me say that again. If you do not let God rule your life, something else will rule your life. In other words, we can only rule this world if we let God rule our lives. If you remember kayo sa creation, ano po? From day 1 to day 6. Day 1, light. Day 2, sky and water. Day 3, land. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, fish and birds. Day 6, animals, and then us, man. If you notice, yung mga nahuling mga create, they're always superior dun sa mga nauna. Yung na-create ng day 6, mas superior sa day 5, mas superior sa day 4, mas superior sa day 3, mas superior sa day 2, mas superior sa day 1. In other words, tayo po mga tao, we are mandated by God to rule all the creation. And God in day 7, it's like He's telling, okay, I'm ruling you. You rule the whole world, pero ako ang ruler ko. In other words, it's like God is saying, the only way for you, for us to rule this world is if you allow God to rule over us. Because if we don't allow God to rule over us, something else will rule us. We can never rule our insecurities in life if we will not let God rule over us. We will never rule our struggles in life if we will not let God rule over us. We will never rule our financial struggles if we will not let God rule over us. If we will not let God rule over us, then these struggles, these financial problems, these relational problems will rule over us. Ang problema po sa atin, most of the time, na God, I'm okay with the idea of me ruling the world, pero you ruling me, ayoko. And how many of you know that tayo mga tao, we become very uncomfortable if someone is ruling over us. Diba gusto natin tayong susunod, we call the shots. But God is saying, no, I will rule over you. So you can rule over people. You can rule over the world. Pero tayo minsan naman, pakalang ko sa'yo, pastor, sasabihin ko kung gusto kong sabihin. Gagawin ko kung gusto kong gawin. Ipopost ko kung gusto kong post. Gagastusin ko kung gusto kong gastusin. Bibilin ko kung gusto kong bilhin. Sasabihin ko kung gusto kong sabihin. Yung opinion ko, sasabihin ko yung opinion ko. Ay, bali masakan. My opinion is what matters. Sabi nga sa Facebook, everybody has an opinion, I will say my opinion. And, you know when we say that, it's like indirectly we're saying, Lord, I don't like you ruling over me. I want myself ruling myself. Ay, tinarayan niya ako, tatarayan ko siya, mas matindi pa, makakatingin siya sa akin at makapag-church na ako mamaya. Parang gano'n. Okay, and sometimes we're so proud. I came to that point before na I became so proud of me being a strong personality. Minsan pinapamayabang ko pa na okay, ganyan ka magsalita. Tingnan natin kung gaano katindi yung kasabihin ko sa'yo. And I'm even proud of saying that. But what I'm saying is, ironically, what we're saying, we call God Lord, and yet we are the Lord. In the New Testament, Jesus Christ said, why do you call me Lord and you do not do what I say? It's very ironic. And if He is not the ruler of earth, indirectly it's like we're saying, Lord, huwag mong pakialaman. I don't want you to rule over me. And that's where the problem is. If we do not let God rule over us, then something else will rule over us. Our insecurities will rule over us. Our job would rule over us. Our finances would rule over us. Our desires would rule over us. Dapat day 6 tayo can-relate. But because all these things are ruling over us, parang day 1 tayo can-relate. Pinakamababa. But let me tell you, you are not created in day 1. You are created in day 6. You're supposed to rule over the world. And you're supposed to let God rule over us. So Genesis chapter 1 tells us the hierarchy of things. Number 2. Next, what does Genesis tell us? Genesis tells us about our roles, as rebuilders. So una, it tells us the hierarchy of things. Pangalawa, it tells us na tayo po, we have this role to rebuild this world. We have this role to rebuild this nation. It's like Genesis 1 is telling us na, okay, God created everything. God is concerned with everything. God is concerned with your life. God is concerned with your love life. God is concerned with your job. God is concerned with your personal life, with your relationships. Because God created everything, God is concerned with everything. That's why tayo mga Kristiyano, we Christians, we are not just called to go to church every Sunday at yun na. That's it. Okay? This is not just our call. We are called to rebuild this world. And how many of you know na, di ba, ang mundo po natin ngayon ay napakagulo na. I mean, what was created by God as good, now it's broken. Dito lang po sa simbahan, even in our church, if you look around, all of us in here, we were broken people. Different areas. Some of us, we come from a broken family. Some of us, we experience broken relationships. Some of us, we are financially broke. Our wallets are broken. Some of us, our identities are also broken. Sino ba ako? I mean, people tell me I'm like this, but I'm not. This world is now kung tayo nga pala sa simbahan, they're already broken. How much more those people outside the church? And as rebuilders, we are called to rebuild this world. Broken relationships, broken families, broken personalities, broken identities, broken emotions. And I think all of us would say yes if I would ask you, have you accepted God as your Lord and Savior? I think the answer would be yes. But have we accepted God as our Creator? Because as we bear the image of God as Creator, we are also called to rebuild and recreate the world that is very broken right now. We are called to rebuild this world. And as you would ask yourself, honestly, if you would ask yourself, am I fulfilling my call to be a rebuilder? I mean, I've seen a lot of broken things around me. Am I fulfilling that call to rebuild? Na problema pa yung ganito. Sometimes, hindi na lang tayo nagre-rebuild. Tayo pa yung nag-cause ng pagka-destroy. Hindi na nga tayo tumutulong na i-rebuild ang mundong ito. Tayo pa yung nagsa-start na masira ang mga relationship, masira ang personality namin ito, masira ito sa trabaho, masira ang pamilya, masira ang kanyang ang pagkatao, nasira dahil sa ating mga sinasabi. So, we're not, sometimes, hindi na tayo rebuild, tayo pa yung cause ng destruction. And I hope we will not end up that way. Because in Genesis 1, we are called to rebuild this world. Ang problema daw po, I've read this somewhere. Ang problema daw po ay parang apoy. Ang apoy, kung gusto natin makapula yung apoy, dapat bubuhusan natin ang tubig. Okay, so, okay. Para makapula ang apoy, buhusan ng tubig. Ang problema, hindi na kagatungan. Imbis sa buhusan ng tubig, nilagyan ng panggatong, nilagyan ng palako, so, ginagawa. Ito naman nasusunod, ito pa, gatuman niya pa ako, gatuman pa, ilike pa ako, marami share, ganun. So, ginagawa. Minsan, bukod pa sa panggatong, binubuhusan pa natin ng gasolina. So, lalo mo maboy, parang ganun. So, nagalit. So, but as a rebuilder, we are called to rebuild this world. Parang chismis po. Ang chismis, yan po daw ay parang apoy. Huwag mong gatungan para mamatay. So, parang ganun. So, problems are like that. I hope na as Christians, na in this world, if we see something broken, na we will not end up being apathetic. Ano yung apathetic? Yung parang walang pakialam. Ay, pakalakan sa buwan. Ako'y okay, may nang maganda. Ako'y okay, asawa kayo okay, kumain ako'y okay, hindi maganda. But, tayo po as Christians, become a warm and vibrant community of Filipino disciples engaged in reaching the nations. We are called to rebuild our nation. We are called to rebuild this world. Kaya nga ako nung nakaraan ng registration ng election, I'm encouraging everybody na to register, kahit na bulok ang ating system sa Pilipinas, one of the ways for us to rebuild our nation is to really vote. To practice our responsibility as a citizen to vote this coming election. So, part of that is this, I hope that we will not end up being apathetic, na walang pakialam. At hindi tayo mag-end up na nagkakatong or nagbubusa na sa gasolina. But we will go on who will rebuild this nation. My prayer is this, na we will not end up na mabuhay na lang tayo ng walang pakialam. Na mabuhay na lang tayo ng walang pakialam sa mundo. Because whatever our disposition is in this world, whether you're a teacher, whether you're unemployed, whether you're a helper, whether you're just a wife or a husband, or you're a student, all of us are called to rebuild this world. Noong isang linggo, as we talk about Genesis, sabi natin, di ba, at that time, Adam felt his call to flourish this world. Noah failed to rebuild this world. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, all these people, they would rise, they would fall, they would rise, they would fall. At tayo na po yung may responsibility niya ngayon. We are called to rebuild this world. We are called to rebuild our nation. So Genesis tells us about our roles as a rebuilder. Nung una po, it tells us the hierarchy of things. Pangalawa, it tells us about our roles as a rebuilder. And I'm gonna close that. And as I close, maybe some of you are mad at me right now. Or maybe, ano ba kung sinasabi ko pastor naman ganyan. Why is he telling all these things? But I think the encouragement in the end, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 to 3, the Bible says in here, by the seventh day, God had finished the work He had been doing. So on the seventh day, He rested from all His work. And God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. Now when God said that He rested not because He's tired. Di naman napapagod si God. Di naman siya nakubusan ng energy. No? And most of the theologians would say that God rested because that's His time to appreciate His creation.